What's up guys, Brady Fugel here, coming at you with another video, and today it's going to be the start of another new series I'm going to be doing. It's going to be just about my favorite albums. I'm doing this one just so I could talk about my favorite albums, but also just so there's a bit of context, because when these bands do release new albums and I do reviews of the albums, then there can, again, kind of just be context as far as my opinions and thoughts on their older catalogs and what albums by them stand out to me personally. And the first album that I'm going to be tackling with this is Killswitch Engage's Incarnate. It came out March 9th, I believe, of 2016, so about 8 years ago now. This was the second album since Killswitch Engage reunited with their original singer Jesse Leach after the departure of Howard Jones in 2012, and it was the follow-up to 2013's Disarm the Descent, which was a huge comeback in the Killswitch Engage catalog after the somewhat weak 2009 self-titled. This album is a very, very important album to me personally because Killswitch Engage was really one of the first metal bands that I ever listened to. As someone who grew up listening to just more hard rock, it wasn't until Disarm the Descent dropped in 2013 where I really started to explore metal a little bit. I discovered the song Always off of that album, which is one of my favorite Killswitch songs ever of all time, and maybe one of my favorite songs of all time. That song just resonated with me so much. And it really got me excited for this next Killswitch release at the time. And there are so many things that I love about this album, but the biggest one for me, and this is something that not a lot of albums do, I'd say probably 3 total albums can do this for me, and that's just creating layers of memories for me. Because how it typically goes for me when I discover a new album is I really get hooked on it. I'm listening to it for weeks at a time, months at a time even sometimes, and as time goes by, I kind of start to associate that album with certain memories or of things I was doing or places I went around that time I discovered it. So then every time I listen back on it, it reminds me of that time and those places, and sometimes even people I knew at the time. But Incarnate, like I said, is probably one of 3 albums that even when I revisit it usually on like a yearly basis, around springtime, around usually the month of March, which is when it came out, I build new memories with this album every time I revisit it. It's not just this album reminds me of this time. It's this album reminds me of so many times, so many different times throughout the years. I remember in interviews at the time, Jesse Leach was talking about how he hoped that the album would take on personal meanings every time with each listen. The first listen and up to the 10th, 20th listen. And I can't express enough how much that literally embodies how I view this album. This is without a doubt my favorite Killswitch Engage album of all time, and probably a top 3 album of all time, just by any artist. I remember when this album came out, I was a sophomore in high school, and we took a field trip to this big art museum at the time with my art class, and I remember walking through the art museum with these songs playing in my headphones, of course, and I remember going to track practice, walking through the hallways at school, things like that, and that's just the first few listens of this album. And then over the years, I associate this album with certain drives to places, just scenery at the time, places I went throughout the month of March. And most recently, specifically the last 2 years, it's gotten even more meaningful to me as both last year and the year before, I lost one of my dogs. And I remember obviously being super sad and depressed both those days that happened. And I remember listening to this album and hearing parts like The Bridge of Embrace the Journey Upraised, The Bridge of It Falls on Me, Just Let Go, pretty much that whole song, and just like looking into the sky and kind of fighting these feelings of uncertainty, but this music and these songs and this album kind of gave me some kind of sense of reassurance that, you know, wherever they are, they're okay. This album's lyrics and vocal performance by Jesse Leach are just so full of introspection and inspiration, and that reflects beautifully on the instruments. Because not only are there some amazing melodies on this album that, again, like I said, really reflect the lyrical themes and vocal performance from Jesse Leach, there are also some insanely catchy and heavy riffs and grooves, and really just awesome parts being done by every instrument. I would argue that this is Killswitch Engage's most experimental record, even doing things like the verses of Alone I Stand are in a 17/16 time signature. The song Embrace the Journey Upraised really just has so many different moving parts and really cool sounding mood shifts. Cut Me Loose is another song that's very dominant chord driven and again has some really cool mood shifts. And The Great Deceit is maybe one of Killswitch Engage's heaviest songs ever, with lots of thrash-based ideas and a very dark yet anthemic chorus. But my favorite song on the album has to be It Falls On Me, just with its various different and distinct parts throughout the entire song. It has multiple changes in time signature. It has some amazing chord progressions that really just capture the despair that the song was written to convey. Specifically the bridge of the song, just around like the 2 minutes 15-second mark, I've already signaled that out as just this really emotional and moving chord progression that just, again, captures that despair so perfectly. These songs just feel so inspired, and that's something that especially sticks out to me after the release of their 2019 album Atonement, which was a decent album, but just lacked that really deep lyrical inspiration that was on this record. Another thing I like about this album, both lyrically and sonically, is how it kind of progresses throughout, as it starts a bit more inspirational, uplifting, and positive in the first half of the album, but then once you get to Embrace the Journey Upraised, that's kind of like a midpoint, and then after that, it kind of goes more in the dark direction, both lyrically and sonically. And the album ends with maybe two of the, less inspired ones, but still some very good songs in the forms of We Carry On and Ascension. And to me, this is a perfect album, but if I had to criticize it for anything, it would probably be that, just that the last two songs might feel a little uninspired, at least compared to the rest of the album. Now, why may other people not like this album? For one, and the most obvious one, it's heavy metal, it's metalcore, there are screams in it, which unfortunately just turns a lot of people off who aren't into metal. But specifically talking about Killswitch Engage fans, why do a lot of fans maybe put this on the bottom half of the Killswitch catalog? And to me, the most obvious answer is that simply it is because Howard Jones is not singing on this album. The Killswitch fan base is extremely split, and there's a lot of, I don't want to say strife, but a lot of debate over who the better vocalist is in Killswitch Engage. And I am going to make a separate video for this in general, just because I really don't like that debate. I think Jesse and Howard are both amazing vocalists, and they both have things that, one does better than the other, or vice versa. And they sound very similar vocally too. And maybe not to a Killswitch fan, but to somebody that doesn't really listen to metal, they might not even realize that these are two different guys singing. The biggest difference between them, in my opinion, is that Howard is just a much, technically better clean singer. And both vocalists really have heavy influence on how the music sounds. And to me, Jesse's albums with Killswitch Engage just sound a lot more on the edge. They sound a lot more hardcore influenced, and Howard's just are a bit more mainstream to me. And this is obviously going to cause a lot of, differences in opinions based on which incarnation, no pun intended, of Killswitch Engage is quote-unquote better. And if you are a fan of the more streamlined, mainstream-influenced Howard albums, then this album might not stick out as much to you. I also think a big part of why people may place this album in the lower half of the Killswitch catalog is just because of how it doesn't focus as much on these big mainstream hooks like the Howard albums do. There's still plenty of that on here, specifically the singles Hate by Design and Strength of the Divine, and I would also say We Carry On has that as well, at least throughout the whole songs, because all these songs have very big triumphant choruses. It's just a matter of kind of what surrounds it. The biggest example of that for me has to be Alone I Stand, as well as Embrace the Journey Upraised, which both, again, have these very clean choruses, but are surrounded by some of the most dynamic and almost progressive sections in the history of Killswitch Engage. So if you're someone who does appreciate just the more hooky, more mainstream aspects of Killswitch Engage's music, then that might be a turnoff for you. And another thing is that I think just not enough people give this album multiple chances, because for me, this album hooked me right away, just because of the emotion it carried. But again, this is an album that definitely takes a few listens before you can really appreciate the inspiration behind it. As far as songs I haven't talked about yet, I really like Quiet Distress. I like the more somber acoustic opening, but then it transitioned into maybe one of the heaviest riffs on the whole album, again, very thrash influenced, much like The Great Deceit. And it has such a natural flow between its really blistering heavy sections and its very clean and emotional sections. Until the Day is another song that does that really well. I really like the In Flames influenced chorus and kind of how it flips the Killswitch formula in a sense that it has more of a heavier screamed chorus and clean vocal verses. If you haven't given this album a listen, I highly suggest you do, especially if you are a metal fan and a Killswitch Engage fan that might not have given it a fair chance. But that about does it. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.